Hey everybody, I'm here today with Aldo Dinucci. Professor Dinucci is joining us to talk about his experience with running Stoicism practice groups. This is the Stoic Fellowship podcast. My name is Patrick Barry, and in this discussion, we're going to be talking about not Stoicism itself and the content of the philosophy, but the the ins and outs of running groups dedicated to helping people to practice Stoicism and related wisdom traditions. Professor Dinucci, thank you for joining us.
Welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So for people who don't know who you are already, can you just say a little bit about who you are and your background? How you got interested in Stoicism and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I started to study Stoicism 24 years ago.
Hmm.
I'm graduated in philosophy, and I have also a master's degree and a doctorate degree in ancient philosophy. And 24 years ago, my interest started on Stoicism, and I've been practicing and studying Stoicism since then.
Oh wow, 24 years. I mean, so before it was cool. Well, that's that must have been felt like it must be quite an experience to have watched the resurgence of interest in that time. I imagine when you started getting interested in it, you must have felt like the only one. Um, yeah, tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
uh, uh, I I did my graduation, and I they taught me nothing about Stoicism at all. I had
Hmm.
no idea about Stoicism, and I was lecturing at a Catholic university in Petrópolis. It's a city nearby Rio de Janeiro, in the mountains, and a volume of Seneca called my attention in the library of this this university, and I started to read the letters, Seneca letters to Lucidian, right? And I found it fantastic. I never read anything like this before. I was fascinated. And some months uh, later, I start to read also the Enchiridion of Epictetus in a French edition. I read both Seneca and Epictetus first in French editions, because by the time there was no editions of, of, of both of them in Portuguese.
Yeah. Yeah, man, how far things have come since since then. I imagine it's not so hard to find editions in Portuguese now. Um, yeah, and I imagine that coming across those. How did you come across those if they didn't teach it to you in your graduate studies?
Yeah, only curiosity, just a matter of curiosity. I was through a difficult time in that university, and I was looking for something to calm me down, literally. And luckily, I found Seneca, who is excellent for this.
Yeah, yeah. And now, can you tell us a little bit about, so you're a professor now. Can you tell us a little bit about what subjects you research and teach?
Yeah, I teach and research Stoicism. I'm professor of ancient philosophy at Federal University of Espírito Santo in Brazil, of course. And I translated the Enchiridion of Epictetus, and I made the first translation of the of Epictetus' discourse to Portuguese, the first volume, the first book, right? And by now we are translated the other books, and also I'm the first person to translate Musonius Rufus to Portuguese.
Hmm.
And besides this, I have a lot of students with me doing research and practicing Stoicism.
Yeah, and so you must have seen. I'm curious what your perspective is among your students. Your perspective of your students has been. Do you find that a lot of students now have come to your classes on Stoicism with an interest in it, more so than maybe in the past, or What's your sense of that?
I now I participate in three programs of post-graduations in Brazil. One in Brasilia, one in Sergipe, one in Espírito Santo. And my students come from all parts of Brazil. So I have students from Rio, São Paulo, Porto Alegre, and so on. And especially these interests in Epictetus, they have a special feeling for Stoicism, I think. It's somehow different from Seneca. Epictetus has a kind of spirituality that Seneca doesn't have or doesn't show so much. And these students of Epictetus, they are both students and practices, the followers of Epictetus.
Hmm. And so tell me a little bit about the groups or the stoas that you run. Is it just one group, or tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, just one. It's called Viva Vox or Viva Vox, right? That it is the translation of Seneca of Plato's expressions, logos and psychos, the living word, right?
Hmm.
And I love. We have many people associated with it, both students, academics, and lay people.
And is this associated with university or separate?
No, it's, it's a mix. It's a mix.
Hmm.
It's a group that originated in the university, but by now it has a public character.
I see. Sorry, the name one more time was Viva Vox. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
correct.
gotcha. Um, cool. All right. So it's partially kind of involved with university, but also now like public. And just to kind of paint the picture a little bit, about how many members do you all have and how long has it been running
Uh,
and that sort of thing?
I think well, something between 30 and 40, and it is running since 2008. I think, yeah, 2008.
2008.
Yeah,
Okay. So this
yeah,
is one of the longer lived groups, I imagine, among the ones that the Stoic Fellowship
maybe.
knows about. I mean, 2008 is pretty old. I mean, I know there are some longer groups, but older groups, but that's starting to be a long time now. And out of those 30 or 40 people, are there some who've been around since the beginning, or has it been kind of
Yeah,
a evolving
sure.
turnover of
Yeah,
people?
there is a renovation, but we have special people that are always stuck with us.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I run this group here in Pittsburgh, only just not even quite a year now. Like we started around November or December of last year, coming up on our 1 year mark. And I kind of sometimes almost like daydream or just kind of look forward to the day when the group will have some members who have been a part of it for that long. I imagine that must create a lot of real sense of kinship and camaraderie and the kind of the bonds you can form with somebody over that much time. Yeah, how's that been for you? I imagine among those longtime members, you imagine you start to become pretty good friends.
Oh, surely. Last week we were at Recife. It's a capital of Pernambuco, another state of Brazil, some 2,000 kilometers from here. And we met. I met there Joelson, who is with us since 2000. He is with us even before the creation of Viva Vox, since 2004. And also Vilmar Prata and Danilo Patucci and André Capistrano, who are both epitetians, and a lot of people. So we are really good friends. And
Hmm.
we are always in touch, right, through electronic means. And I think it's the best side of all of this, right, to create good relationships.
Yeah, that is really great. That makes me wonder a couple things. First, just how did this group get going? Can you tell us a little bit about, you say that some people were involved before it kind of formally took shape. Tell us a little bit of the story of, how it began in this informal way to begin with, and how did it become the Vita Vox that the more formal group that it is now?
Yeah, it started when Joelson, my then only a student in graduation, he asked me uh, to teach him English. And I said, I don't have the time, of course, to teach him English, but I can you teach how to learn English. And I gave him a volume of Stockdale's Courage Under Fire, and I asked him to take the dictionary, consult the dictionary, start to translate it. And because this is the way that I learned English, and not to speak, of course, but to read and French and so on. And he did it, and he did a good translation of Stockdale's Courage Under Fire. And we thought maybe if we ask Stanford, they can give us permission to publish it. And they gave us the permission, and we made the edition. And in fact, last week we were together because of this very book, because we did some other editions of it, and we sold these volumes, and with the money we paid the tickets for everybody, also the Airbnb where we were all together.
Nice, nice, nice. Um, okay, so that was sort of interesting that ended up sort of, but okay, so that project helped to like create the funding for getting together. But I mean, how did, I guess, what made you think of getting a group of people together to discuss Stoicism, and how did that,
Yeah,
what
it
yeah.
happened naturally. It happened naturally.
Hmm.
And uh, some years, I think it's 2007, I published university edition of the Enchiridion. It's a very simple one, like the one we have, like the Courage and the Fire edition, right? A simple paper. And I put in the internet an ad asking, saying that if someone wants a free copy of it, he or she must only send me the address. We could send it freely for them.
Hmm.
Uh, the university had this service, and so I start to send Enchiridions or Enchiridia, right, to a lot of people in Brazil,
The
and many of
Enchiridion.
them Enchiridion, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Enchiridia, I saw it in plural, right, in the Greek plural.
Right.
and and from this we attract many people. For instance, Danilo Patucci, he received one of the Epictetus manuals, and started to talk with us, and also Paulo César, many people.
Hmm.
But I didn't it on purpose. It just happened, right? It was not my idea. My idea was just to send the books to people.
And there was just a natural interest in, I guess, once you had sent the Enchiridia in plural to people, that just generated the interest, and did they was the idea of getting together to discuss it? Did that come from
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
or yeah?
Uh, some we start to talk through internet, and some years later, we met at Aracaju in 2016. We called everybody, and we met for the first time in person, right?
Mm.
And since then, we are meeting each year personally, in person, and we are always in touch via internet and so on.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So, in terms of the structure of online versus in-person meeting, so you say that you all get together. I guess it is from all over Brazil. Is that part of why
Yeah.
you only meet once a year? Because it's is that how you do it? You meet in person once a year, and the rest is online via Zoom or that sort of thing.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I see. And
Oh,
how,
because Brazil is a very big country, right?
it is a
It's
big place.
difficult to, yeah.
Right, right. Oh, that's interesting. How? I guess in that scene, obviously that's working for you if it's still going after all this time. I That's an interesting question I always think, since the online thing is in some ways so much easier, and obviously in some circumstances it's kind of necessary, right? Just because of if the spatial distance, if there aren't a lot of people just in one city where it's easy to get together. Um, but what's been your experience with that, with the sort of the pros and cons of um, talking over, Zoom or whatever other kind of video conferencing software versus the in-person meetups? I mean, it seems like getting together in person must be you all do make a point of doing it once a year. So um, how does that work for you?
Yeah, I think the uh, I thought about a lot about it, and I came to the conclusion that for us human beings, the essential is the personal contact, right? The physical contact. Of course, internet is good because we meet people and can talk uh, with them from distance, but nothing can substitute the personal contact. It makes all the difference, right? So I think the internet, these devices are good to keep somehow the relation, but they don't. The relation uh, only starts once we meet the people, the person. Before it, we have something like a virtual relationship, which is not real. It's virtual, not real. You know, okay, you know what I mean?
Yeah, virtual. Um, yeah, yeah, and so just to play devil's advocate, you could wonder, like, well, but if you're just studying the content of Stoicism, like, couldn't you just deal with those concepts and work with those ideas using virtual relationships? Um, do you feel like there's also like a beyond just, of course, people just like having more friends, and that's great, but even for the sake of learning and practicing Stoicism, do you find some value in that real sort of in-person human contact, that sort of not virtual relationship?
Yeah, we have a very ancient form of doing philosophy. You know, in ancient times, philosophy and friendship were things that very close things. So, what's the name of that German philosopher? He, he wrote a book about it, saying that the ancient schools of philosophy are schools of friends, right? So the living philosophers would be friends of the late philosophers through his books and friends among themselves. So friendship, real friendship, was something essential for the running of these schools. Of course, it's not like this today, right? Of course, you can learn all the concepts and everything from internet and so on. But in the end, you know, you feel that loneliness that you need someone to talk with about these subjects in person, and we didn't discover anything to substitute it until now.
Yeah, and I wonder if, like, it seems to me that part of why the that actual friendship could be integral to this actual Stoic practice is that it isn't just, to my mind, just a matter of like learning the concepts in some intellectual way, right? Like that's necessary and a part of it, but seems like if you're really practicing Stoicism, part of it is this kind of personal growth, or, at
Sure.
some point you might have to, and maybe the kinds of sort of, um, I don't know, confrontation of, for lack of a better word, a confrontation with the ways in which you aren't living up to the things that you are trying to live up to. Perhaps I wonder if like that kind of environment of good friendship is the kind of, necessary environment of, I don't know, trust and security and a willingness to be a little bit vulnerable with each other, that like you can open up a little bit and admit, and maybe they can reflect back at you some of the ways, so I don't know, is that especially in your group that's been running so long, and some of these people have known each other for so long, I wonder how much things do get kind of personal in that way, or do you try to keep it, a study of the texts and the books and the subject matter without um, being more personal and I don't know, almost therapeutic about it. How do you all walk that line?
Musonius Rufus has a discourse where he says that the best school of philosophy would be a farm where the teacher, the philosopher, would teach his students, not speaking, but taking care of the plants, taking care of the animals, having meals together. So for the Stoics, the example, the exemplar, are very important. It's not only a question of teaching concepts and so on, but to incarnate philosophy, right?
Mm,
To be you yourself the philosophy you teach, and you cannot do this uh, from distance to other person, or you can, but it's a limited kind of thing, right? I think the same thing of lovers, right? You can you can have a girlfriend or boyfriend that lives in another country, but of course it's not the same thing.
hmm.
I think it's not the real thing; it's the only virtual thing, and you only know that the things will work out when you meet the other person. Otherwise, it will always be virtual. And same thing, I think, with Stoic philosophy. It's easy to talk about it. It's easy to write about it. Um, but to incarnate, do you understand what I mean? It's
Yes.
very difficult. That's the art. That's the important part. To speak very well. There are a lot of intelligent people that can speak, professors and so on. But to incarnate it is the real thing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
for this, we need the help of each other personally, in person. We need the friendship. Seneca says that to be a good person, you need not only to study, to, to make an effort, but also you need lucky, the fortune to meet the right people to help you
Mm.
in this way by their example and their living embodiments, right, of Stoicism.
Yeah, I love that. It does seem like that's a lot of why you would go to the trouble of having a group like this. I mean, if you just want to learn the concepts, you can just get the book from the library and read it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's all written down. Like you don't need to have a group like this just to learn it in some intellectual academic sort of way, right? So that makes me wonder a little bit about the kinds of things you all do in, your online, your virtual meetings on the one hand, your video conference meetings. Um, and then what sorts of things you all do for those meetings? What kinds of, I don't know, how you run those and what's involved.
Yeah,
And then maybe in contrast also to the annual in-person event that you have, what kinds of things you do there? Same kinds of things or different? Or what's an example of like the content of some of these meetings?
we do a lot of personal talk about our own lives and try to interpret it through Stoic ideas, Stoic concepts. And we do it all the time. And also a year, each of us write down a small paper about some subject on Stoicism and presents it, right, in the personal meeting. But it's just one little part of the personal meeting. Usually we have 4 or 5 days, one day for presenting the papers and the others to talk and to discuss things more personally. Because, Stoicism is not a modern philosophy that you can understand in a purely abstract way. Because Stoicism mixed with your own life, with our own lives, right? And when we start to speak about philosophy, we start to speak about ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, so I guess in both the meetings, the both online and in person, you all do, I guess, yeah, so you do make it very personal, discussing things going on in your own lives. And so versus like it being some kind of a exegesis, some kind of like a textual analysis, like let's read these passages together and analyze them in a in the way that academic forum might do? Is that do you do
No,
some of that as well, or
no. Each one choose a, a text or subject, and then he or she makes a survey and writes down a small paper and present to us. Sometimes there are we made an exegesis of some difficult passages also. It's a part of the, but not in the in-person meetings. We do it online. First we send the text to each to each interested person, and then we discuss it later after we read.
hmm. Now it's interesting that you have that people in the group actually present prepare and present these small papers. That's a fair bit of work to put something like that together and be ready to present it. But I suppose what's the old saying? The best way to learn something is to teach it. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, surely, surely.
yeah, that's an interesting this is an interesting approach. I mean, I imagine over this many years, you've tried, you've kind of, I imagine you've experimented with different, various things to various ways of running a group like this, or you've tried some things that have worked better than others. Like, I've been a little reluctant to suggest something like preparing and presenting on a topic just because of the time investment it would take and whether people actually have the time for that. Um, but it's an interesting idea. Is there anything you'd want to share with us about just thinking back on the different things that you've tried with the group you're running? Are there things you've tried that kind of didn't work out and you had to realize that didn't click with the group, or and things that have worked really well, like kind of lessons learned there?
We as you know, we started long ago, and we took notes about the other emerging groups in the world later, much later. And at first, we thought that everybody was doing something similar, but then I started to follow some international groups, and I understood that they, they didn't, right? So I tried to do something like you in the United States and in Europe do in your groups, but it didn't work out in Brazil for some reason. It didn't. I don't know exactly why. What's the reason? Maybe it's too formal for us because Brazil we have African people, Latin people, and we have a different uh, culture and a different way of behaving. I'm not sure, but what I know is that it didn't work out at all. People was bored. People were bored, and people didn't like at all the way uh, that way of running the things. So I finally I found this format, and I'm following it since then.
Hmm. That's a really good point too. I think that maybe sometimes people might assume that there's a format or a way of running these kinds of meetings that there might be a kind of a one size fits all to it, that like maybe there are better and worse ways of doing it, that if we learn some better ways that we could apply that sort of anywhere. But it sounds like what you're saying is you found that there's a way in which, like, just because of cultural differences, that like people from a certain cultural background might just resonate with one way of like a, I don't know, maybe making it more personal, or maybe in different cultures, keeping it more formal might let people be more comfortable, right? I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want to stereotype cultures here, but like you could imagine in some places that the people might just tend to be less comfortable with making things more personal, and like there's a certain, I don't know, safety to keeping it a little bit more intellectualized or something. And maybe there's a way in which people running these groups just need to kind of be sensitive to that, and kind of like adapt what they do to be what works well in a given culture for a given set of people. There's
yeah,
a kind of an organic quality to that, it seems.
yes, yes. In Brazil, for example, we are not formal at all, so it's
Mhm.
difficult to us to keep that formal. state, right?
Mm.
Understand? You're very talkative and personal. In it's very different from Europe and United States. It's not better or I, I'm not saying that you're superior or inferior, but it's different. You understand?
Yeah, no, that's a really
It's a
good point.
different way to live.
Yeah, yeah, there are going to be these kinds of like cultural differences sometimes, and I guess yeah, you have to sort of see what works for a given group of people. That's a really good point. Um, though I wonder, speaking of being a bit more personal about it, even in a culture where people are maybe prefer that and maybe just that's sort of their natural mode, have you ever run into when you start getting personal about these sort of matters, these matters that are very, very central to life, very almost kind of maybe spiritual in their aspect, for lack of a better word, um, and the things that, the kinds of things that people might talk about with their therapist if they had one, that like, have you ever had any issues with things becoming, I don't know, maybe even like too personal, or like people needing to establish boundaries in terms of what kinds of feedback or even like kind of like confrontations they're okay with, or people who maybe genuinely really need therapy from someone who's trained in psychotherapy and not so yeah, seems like there's a line to walk of like letting things be personal, but if every meeting was a full confession and ego destruction for every person involved, that might be going too far. So what so have you had an experience with trying to walk that line of letting it be personal
Yeah,
but not going too far or something?
yeah. There are some people that come to Stoicism in need of another kind of treatment, so to say. Because Stoicism, it will not solve psychological problems or mental problems, mental issues. So sometimes we attract people like this and they say, sorry, cannot help you on this subject. It can help you on other subjects, specifically on philosophy, right? Talking about philosophy, but we don't have the, the conditions to help you on these subjects because you're not professionals, not psychologists, you're not psychiatrists, and it happened. Unfortunately, it happened sometimes. I think it's natural because people are suffering. They see something that they think that could help them, and but they have no idea, no proper idea of what's going on, what's philosophy, what's stoicism, and it unfortunately happens sometimes. But and among us, the limits are the limits of friendship, right? And for me, friendship is first of all uh, uh, to help the other person. For instance, if you are in a foreign city, if someone helps you telling where is the cash or the bank, he's your friend for just at that moment, at the
Mhm.
precise moment. And some people help us for a long time, some people for just a moment, but they are friends equally, independently of the time they are being friends. So being friends is to help the other in some way or other, and that's the boundaries.
That's
Other
it.
things are not allowed.
Yeah, actually, that's an amazingly sort of maybe kind of obvious, but seems like a good kind of rule of thumb. Is like everyone knows, like in a good friendship, there's a degree to which like being a good friend to somebody can involve like maybe sometimes telling them what they don't want to hear about, like, yeah, maybe you're being the jerk in this relationship or something, like a good friend will be honest in that way, but also a good friend isn't going to psychoanalyze you like in great depth. That's a
Surely.
I think everyone knows from their friendships when it becomes what's a way of helping, each
Mhm.
other, and in the spirit of helping, and being a good friend and being honest, but not being their therapist, right? Like like
Yeah.
that's actually a pretty good. I like that as a rule of thumb. That's good.
It's being available, it's being comprehensive.
Yeah.
It's being able to hear more than
Mm.
to talk. And
That
to
can be
be
tricky.
the first rule is to be available. So you know
Mm.
if someone is your friend when he's always available, and he always or she has time for you. For
Right.
me, it's the first and the essential sign of friendship.
Right. Right. That's a good. Do you all have other kind of rules, whether they're, I don't know, written down and overt or just sort of understood about like about these sort of boundaries we're talking about? Being available is like, being a friend in that way. Have you had to, or do you have any of these sort of like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Some years ago, we had a problem because we had a very strong group, um, and we were all friends, but some people didn't want to accept more people.
Mm.
They wanted to close the group. To and I said it's not. I can't. I can't admit it because Stoicism is for everybody. We cannot close the group. It's like a church, right? You must have the doors open, otherwise it's not a church at all, right? It's another thing. And so you have a fight, a verbal fight, and in the end, some people left. But from then on, it's the second rule and to be always open for everybody. Everybody who wants to join us can join us. The, independently of the race or gender or religion, everybody can join us.
Yeah, those are good. So being available, being open. Um, that's an interesting kind of topic though, because I I would totally agree with you, and I think it's a good principle, at least in principle, to be open to everyone who wants to join a group. I'm just thinking from I've kind of wondered about this in running the group I run here in Pittsburgh, just as a sort of logistical and practical matter. If the group got larger, I wouldn't know, like beyond a certain point, I would start to wonder how to run it because right now it's just it can operate just as an informal conversation, and we only meet in person. Um, I just a preference of mine. Nothing against online things. I just like meeting in person. Maybe it's because I work on a computer that like I don't need more computer time. I need real life. And when you're meeting in person to have a conversation, if you get beyond about I don't know 8 people or so, it becomes hard to have just an organic conversation. Then like the need sort of like the if you have 10 or 12 people, you'll notice this, right? In a conversation, it will tend to bifurcate. It'll people will break up into 2 or 3 groups of 3 or 4 people or 5 people. Or if you try to force it to be one conversation, then everyone's been waiting for so long for their turn to speak that when it comes to them, they jump back 10 minutes in terms of topic, and to have a single flowing conversation. There just seems to be a certain head count that works well for, and so I've been struggling a little bit personally with. I would like to grow the group further. It's just that if we had 15 people attending it on any given day, I wouldn't know what to do. Then what do you do? You have a presentation. It becomes a different thing.
Yeah, that's the reason I think the presentation of papers worst, because when someone is presenting, the others are paying attention in silence, and after then can make questions, and there is a controlled dialogue between among people. Of course, after the presentation, it happens. The bifurcation of the conversation is natural, right? But we can keep everybody together while reading, each one is reading his paper. It's like something like a church, you know. There is the time when someone is reading a part of the Bible and everybody's listening, and then the priest, the father, explains that part. We use similar approaches. I
Yeah,
think that's the reason, because we are in majority culturally Catholics, not following the doctrine, but culturally uh, educated in Catholicism, and somehow maybe it's the font I I followed unconsciously.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I guess if you have enough people to be in that situation, I mean, 30 or 40 is a very different number than, 6 or 8. Then maybe, for someone to take a turn presenting, it's just like there's a certain amount of work to have that sort of presentation ready, like if you're meeting frequently, um, you would need to have enough people to spread that kind of effort around on, like, otherwise it's becomes a real burden to the few people who, right now I'm usually the one to think of topics at my group. And so if I had to always have a presentation ready, it would just be way more work for me. So yeah, that's interesting for larger groups. You do need to start to have more of a presentation type of a model to make that work. I don't know exactly where that threshold is between somewhere around, I don't know, 10, 12 people. It starts to be, once you get above that number, it needs to be a little different. Uh, and speaking of which, do you have people who help you run this group? You mentioned that other people in the group take turns, preparing and presenting some paper, some topic. But aside from that, just sort of I wonder sometimes how much it can really help a facilitator of a stoa in a given city or a given region to have sort of a co-conspirator, so to speak, like a co-host, a co facilitator, someone who's kind of helping them to run the group instead
Surely,
of
surely.
doing the whole thing yourself. Do you have that?
Yeah, you have two guys, Vilmar Prata and Joelson Nascimento. They
Mm,
help me all the time, and they help me to run our blog, Vivavox Stoicism,
mm,
which has already more than 90,000 views. We do this. We write some dissemination texts for the great public, and I think it's a success, right?
mm.
And a lot of people following us and commenting, reading our papers, and I think it has a good impact on society.
Hmm.
And they helping me on this, and other people help me in different ways, doing research, uh, different kinds of research, and, uh, and talking all the time, and discussing subjects. So everybody is helping everybody.
And I imagine would you recommend that to people running a stoa in a given city or region to find someone to be kind of a partner in running it? I mean, I know for me, doing it, like being the only one running it, sometimes, I mean, I now there's now someone I've met here who's being a partner in running it. And I personally find I was starting to feel burned out by kind
Surely,
of this
surely.
solo effort, this doing it kind of all by myself was a burden, and
It
having someone you're doing it with, it was just makes it more fun and helps to share the load.
Yeah, it happened with me in that old Vivavox that I told you. People didn't want to open it to the great public. All the charge was on me, and I got all the responsibility, and they get only the compromise of being friends or not exactly friends. That's why I came out with this conclusion that friendship is to help the other, right? So you must find someone to help you. Also, you must find some friend that can help you with this charge.
Right. Um, yeah. And so was that how did you, so at that point, it was just you running the group, right? And you had to find some people who were willing to kind of be partners in that.
Yeah. And fortunately, I found I said it's fortune. Of course, we cannot uh, find people, but otherwise life would be very easy. Right? You find your wife or your husband. You find it's not like this. The gods must help us on this.
Yeah, coming across someone who has the right interests and the right motivation and wants to be a partner in it, right? Like there's some serendipity in that.
Yeah. You must
Yeah.
develop the core standards to recognize the person.
Hmm. Yeah.
Otherwise, you meet the people and you will not recognize them, you dismiss them. You're going to keep the wrong ones.
Well, that's a good point. Um, Yeah, and in running this great group for as long as you have, I know that you all, it sounds like you all keep things, fairly personal in how you do in your discussions, both online and in person. But over this much time, as long as you've been running this group, I imagine the topics for these papers and presentations that people do, um, imagine you start to revisit like how many different topics could there be in Stoicism at some point? And it's a question to me, like how much to people like to come to a meeting when there's some new topic, right? Like when the topic is something new that we haven't discussed before. It's like listening to the next episode of a podcast with a new topic. And if one podcast kept repeating the same topic over and over again, you might stop listening to it. But in these matters, like you say, in making Stoicism like incarnate and actually actualizing it in your life, it seems like it's not enough just to learn something once or hear it once and then now you've got it and you can like there's a and speaking of Catholicism, this seems like something that religions figured out a long time ago, is a certain amount of repetition and coming back, these sort of seasonal holidays that are on a certain theme, and it I, I'm curious how much you all, revisit some of the central topics of Stoicism and repeat the similar topics over and over again, or do you try to keep things more novel and fresh and different angles and how much repetition you all have?
Both things, but of course, repetition is essential in Stoicism, right? And we do it all the time. I think it's the great difference between us, our group, and the European and American groups, because it seems to me that you value the spiritual, or what Aldo called the spiritual exercise, right? And you talk a lot of this exercise. It's excellent. I appreciate it. But we in Brazil, we value the spirituality of Stoicism, not the spiritual exercise. And that is the vision of the world Stoicism offers us, according to which we are all we human beings are all uh, daughters and are all a fraternity, right? And sons of God, of the Logos,
Hmm.
and that the cosmos is a great system composed of humans and gods, and it links us to nature, to all other forms of life. And I think it's the true beauty of Stoicism, because it's something that is lacking, it's evidently lacking today in our daily lives, in our culture, in Western culture in general, right? Right now we are suffering that atomization. And we see each other as a stranger, the foreign as a stranger, as a menace, and so it's something that is missing, and for this reason we value it a lot.
Yeah.
The idea that humanity, we are all brothers and sisters, and we can enhance this fraternity somehow through Stoicism, not only through Stoicism, but Stoicism is another way to enhance this, to avoid the enmity that's growing everywhere, the hate that's growing everywhere.
Yeah, no, that's interesting that in, just I guess like you say, culturally, that the people in Brazil that you that are in your group are kind of drawn to that side of Stoicism or that part of it. It seems like you might imagine that you know, different groups, in some groups, people might be more focused on, a lot of the Stoicism you'll find online is, maybe in the life hack sort of way of like the more um the more immediately practical sides of Stoicism, just talking about the dichotomy of control and whatever else is just sort of ways of I don't know, I guess just suffering less and being a little more effective and ruminating less and all of this, staying a little more focused. You could imagine that in some groups that's where people's interest is, right? Like they kind of just want to they want these tools to be able to navigate their life more effectively and with less sort of self-imposed suffering. Um, but if you started talking about some of the more like, the cosmopolitanism and the kind of the global sort of like there's a kind of a deep kind of ecological vision, I think, in Stoicism as well, the sense of connectedness among all humans and with life and this and I've tried to bring up topics like this and the cosmic perspective that Stoicism has, like, just the deeper notions of the logos and our connectedness to nature and the cosmos. Um, and I've noticed that some people kind of like that and resonate with that, and other people are like, let's just talk about dichotomy of control. Um, and it's interesting. Maybe this gets back to what we were saying about tailoring a group for the people in it and the kind of the cultural inclinations that those people might have. That maybe some people are sometimes people are more kind of like thirsty for and interested in that the worldview, the cosmic cosmopolitan perspective of Stoicism, and maybe in other groups people are like less interested in that and just want to keep it at on the practical ethical level. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Here, for example, if you start to talk about spiritual exercise, everybody will be bored very quickly.
Hmm.
But if you start to talk about Stoic spirituality, everybody pay attention. So I don't know. As you said, it depends on the constitution of the group. Maybe because I'm like this, my focus is on Stoic spirituality. I attract the people that have the same focus, the same interest. But I think both ways are good ways to study philosophy. I practice the Stoic exercise, the spiritual exercise, as Aldo calls it. But for the people, for us, it's not an interesting subject to discuss about.
Right, right. I guess you probably learned that one the hard way. When people's eyes were glazing over when you're um well, and speaking of things that different groups might have different appetites for, does your group do much in terms of like other types of activities together beyond the meetings, like whether it's, I don't know, going for walks in the woods or outdoor activities or having meals together, like
Yeah,
um
yeah, yeah.
sometimes people talk about doing these sort of things. You can call it community building, which is, but these other kinds of activities to kind of round out.
Sure, sure,
Yeah,
sure.
what do you all do those sort of things?
Yeah, meals together, walking around. And last week we were at the Brenan Museum. I don't know if you know it. It's a fantastic museum of these artists in Brazil. It's a
Hmm.
great farm full of sculptures that he himself uh, made, and we spent all day long there discussing and talking and relaxing. And I think it's the most important part of the seminars are these,
Oh, that's nice. That sounds really.
the
What was?
talking, the meals, and the walking, and
Yeah.
drinking a little some beer also.
But really having that experience together, yeah, that sounds amazing. Let that ambulance go by. Um, yeah, and so I imagine, so you all do other activities like that. I suppose you might recommend that to other STOA
Surely, surely.
facilitators as a thing to do,
Yeah, yeah. Take a walk through the forest. If you have a forest nearby, go to the beach,
or beach.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
have a meal together, prepare it at home, yeah, and go to the pub, take some drafts. And Seneca recommends it. He says sometimes it's good to drink some beer some not, and to talk aloud and to walk through the fields. And it's important. He says that our reason is like a field that if you use it all the time, it becomes exhausted. So from time to time, we must we make it to rest, and it will be productive again later. So it's a very important part indeed.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of
It
sense.
seems contradictory with Stoicism, but it's not.
That makes a lot of sense. So we're coming up on the hour mark here. I did want to ask you a little bit also before I let you go about how you and your group have, well, whether you have, and if so, how you have made use of the resources that the Stoic Fellowship makes available through their website, and it's meant to kind of help groups like this. I guess first of all, how you've used any of those resources if you have, and either way, like what kind of additional ways could you imagine the Stoic Fellowship being a a resource for facilitators? Like if you like what do you think would be the kind of ideal way that um so that we could like help bridge these groups and be a resource to people like you and what we'd like to see
Yeah,
there?
it's a good question. I don't have an answer for this, but first of all, I think it's important what we are doing,
Mm,
communicating, right? And I think this kind of communication is essential to all Stoic groups around the world. But I'm not sure about to do later, what I must do later. Or sorry, I have so much work running this group in Brazil that I
mm,
barely have time to do other things. Unfortunately, I could not attend the last meetings of our group, international group. I didn't have time, but I'm trying to be more connected with you all and to help and to be helped by you. I'm not sure how, but
right. Well,
I think there is a way, that there is a path.
yeah. Well, let me ask you this way then. Yeah, I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but like, you have been running this group for a while, and maybe at this point you all have it sort of, it's sort of set up and you've got it running. Um, but are there ways in which you could use some kind of like, I don't know, help or support, or are there ways that, you know, would you want to kind of like share resources either in both directions, right? Um maybe taking advantage of the experience of other Stoa facilitators, or maybe since you've been at it for a while, like could you imagine other ways of, I don't know, mentoring other facilitators who are starting groups, or 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 maybe are you pretty happy with what you got right now, and you're not needing much more in either direction?
Maybe we can invite not you personally, not only you, but others to talk with us in meetings, in virtual meetings, so you can present some points on the Stoicism, on your practice, and we can discuss. I think it will be an interesting thing to do to
Mm,
the Brazilian audience. We all speak in English, or at
mhm,
least we all understand English.
mhm,
So it would be an idea, a good idea. One of you already talked with us some years ago, Greg Sadler, or Greg,
mhm.
the one with the bird. What the name? Greg. Uh,
Sadler or Lopez or
Greg Sadler.
yeah, yeah.
No, not Greg Sadler. No, Greg. Sorry, I forgot the second name. And
Mhm,
also the sellers talked with us. It was a great experience.
mhm.
So maybe it's just an idea.
Yeah. That is a cool idea because I do wonder a lot about how we can best take advantage of the fact that you're in Brazil and I'm in Pittsburgh, and we're talking, that, like you were saying, the kinds of friendships that you can build in person are indispensable for any given group to really have that connection with the other members in the group, and to really support each other and be friends to each other in this way you're talking about. but we're living in a time where we also have this ability to connect all across the world, and some kind of hybrid approach where, it seems like it would also be a shame to not take full advantage of that, right? To leverage the ways in which we can connect, so each group doesn't have to be an island unto itself, without any. So yeah, like, I mean, maybe, giving talks to other groups, or just connecting in various ways might help to sort of enrich it. And I would just love something I would like to see is I would love to see just photographs of. I mean, I kind of feel like, now that I'm on the board for the Stoic Fellowship, I have a sense of how many groups there are around the world and how many members those groups have, but it's sort of still largely kind of invisible a little bit, like,
Good idea, good idea.
yeah, like you have a group of 30 or 40, which is relatively big. I've got, about 15 or so people here. Um, I would just love to see when you all meet, especially in person, just, sharing group photos of like all these people around the
Uh,
world who are, I don't know, just brainstorming. But
I will post on the site. I think I can do this, right? I will post on the site
yeah,
of the
you could
Stoic
send it to us.
Fellowship.
We'll figure it out. Yeah.
We have a fresh pics actually from last week.
Oh, great. Great, great. Yeah, just even just that sense of everyone else around the world doing it. That just by itself is just a that
Yeah.
sense of community is important.
Pics where we are presenting, pics where drinking, pics where we are walking and discussing. And I'll post there. I think
Nice.
you like it.
Nice. Well, and hopefully some of the other STOA facilitators listening to this will be taking some pearls of wisdom, some lessons of the experience you've had, running your group, and maybe it can help them in running theirs. Um, so Aldo, is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we go? Anything else?
No, I appreciate. Thanks for inviting me for the talk. I think it was excellent. Thanks very much.
Great. And last thing, if people want to know anything more about you or the group you run, is there a place online that you would want to send them?
Yeah, our blog is aldodinucci.blogspot.com. It's
Hmm.
the VivaVox Stoicism blog, and there you can find all the directions and all the info about us and about our activities.
Excellent. Well, Professor Dinucci, thank you so much for talking with us.
See you. Bye bye.